Turn your, there you are, and there you are.
Hi,
It's amazing. I was
Nikki.
just telling Camila, this seems like science fiction, and in particular today, it really does. Um, Wonderful. This is fantastic. I don't know, Camila, if you can see, but we still have attendees joining. So I see a bunch of our students here, which is extremely exciting. And we're going to get going here. It won't surprise my students to know that I have a couple things to say before we get started. And that'll give us time to get a couple more folks to join us. But I want to thank all of you in the virtual space who are here joining us today for the first of our 7-part KeyNotes virtual jazz residency series, made possible by the generous support of the Jerome Mirza Foundation. From the visioning and planning to production, we have many people to thank for making this exciting series possible. Thank you to Knox College, the whole place, Provost Schneider and President Amat, the Knox College Communications Office, with special thanks to Bria Cunningham and Lisa Van Riper. Thanks to iMagiqWorks for our stunning graphic design campaign. And there are not enough thank yous in the world to give to Andy Crawford, who is truly the engine that makes this series and so much of what we do in the Knox Jazz Year run so smoothly. As per usual, Andy is behind the scenes, but everything that went well today is a testament to Andy and of course to Camila. All thanks go to both of them. And lastly, I'd like to thank and welcome tonight's keynote resident artist, Camila Meza. It's an honor and a privilege to premiere this exciting series with Camila, a guitarist and vocalist of such incredible talent. And as you've just seen in her keynote talk, an educator and artist of great creativity and insight. I wanted to say briefly before we get started with questions, how you can participate. For our folks who are joining us on YouTube live streaming, we have some of our students and a couple of friends here in the Zoom call with us, so they can be participating by submitting questions through Zoom, and I'll talk to you briefly about that in a moment. But if you're watching us on YouTube, Andy, back in the background, is monitoring our YouTube comments. So if you have questions for Camila, you can submit those into YouTube. I believe you'll see the comment stream, and you may also have a chat screen that's available on YouTube. You can use either one of those to submit questions to us, and Andy will send those my way. If you are here with us in the Zoom call in the webinar, you can participate a couple of different ways. You can submit questions in the chat or the Q&A. I would ask, I think you have both. If you can use the chat, it's easier for me to see things coming from one stream, but I will check both of those. You can type in text comments there. And if you would like to talk to Camila, go ahead and raise your hand in Zoom. You should have the raise hand function, and I will see that on my screen, and then I'll open up your mic and you can talk to Camila and you can pose your question and discuss with her voice to face through the internet. So lots of different ways to participate. And I will say, this is a first time for us, this entire format, this setting, this Q&A platform. So we don't know what to expect. I'm thrilled to see so many people here, so many people who just watched the fantastic presentation that Camila put together for us. And so we will get through as many questions as we can. If we don't get to your question, that means we were inundated, which is a great problem to have. So I would like to, I of course came preloaded with a few questions, but I want to say hi to Camila first and just welcome you and thank you for joining us. And see, now that we've gotten through this part of it, what was it like putting this presentation together? Is this something that you've done before, or is this kind of a different format for you?
Yeah, well, hello everyone on Zoom and on YouTube. I want to thank Nikki and Andy for this opportunity. This was, as I was mentioning to them earlier, it was beautiful and challenging at the same time. I've done some shorter versions of educational videos right now, especially this last year. It's something that an outlet that we've been sort of encouraged to explore, but I don't think this is my first time doing a 45-minute masterclass. So that was great, because especially with a topic like this, that it has always been in my head, and I feel that I approach it from several angles. I've never really put it together in this sort of more of a cohesive way, and understand so many aspects of it, and things that I actually hadn't I had dive into but hadn't practiced in a while as well. It put me back on track to some of my own things that I really enjoy and I really like telling my students. So it was great, and I hope everyone enjoyed it, because I had so much fun doing it.
We are super excited that that you did this for us. Folks who are in the Zoom call, please feel free. I'm going to officially open up the gate for questions. So if you have a question, you can throw it into the chat. You can also raise your hand and I will call on you. I'm going to throw out my first question. I have a bunch, so we'll start with them.
And there's no right or wrong questions, just so they know that it could be actually related to what they saw, or it could just be something else they're interested in, yeah, I'm here for you guys, so just throw your questions in.
Awesome. Well, the first question that I had, I've been really impressed with the creative ways that you approach in the interpretation of standards and or covers of other composers' music. And you talk about that a little bit in the presentation that we just saw. And you talked about it so eloquently in the talk. You seem to have so many different ways of approaching covering a song, which I also find extremely interesting. And you talked about some of these in the presentation, from phrasing, tempo, texture, to reharmonization. I really found that your comments about reharmonization were really interesting, because that reharmonizing something seems to kind of dig into something that some people think is fundamental about a song and can't be touched, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you do that, it's such a different way of approaching interpretation. And sometimes you dramatically change the song. I mean, to a point that that philosophers could argue about whether it's still the same song or not. And then sometimes in the work that I've listened to from you, you go to the complete other end of the spectrum to such a minimal change. You come into the song and your approach is so minimal and kind of delicate. And I'm thinking in particular of a song that I listened to, that I fell in love with and then found your cover of, which was Don Bryan's Little Person.
Oh my God, such a good
stunning,
one.
Gorgeous song. If you haven't listened to the song, folks who are watching us on YouTube and in the webinar, or listen to the song, it is just a gorgeous song. And your approach to that was so minimal. You changed very little of it and left it as kind of stark. There wasn't really a lot of reharmonization going on. And so I wonder, this is a big question, I guess, there's such a range. You can dramatically transform a song, or you can come into it, I mean, so delicately like you did with that one. I'm sure it has to do with the song and the material, but how do you kind of make those decisions? And is that a conversation that you have with yourself when you're thinking about how much you want to change, how much you want to bring to the piece, and how much you want to retain from the original recording or the version that you're working off of?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a great question. Because it's exactly what you're mentioning. There's moments and there's particular songs that I found myself really experimenting with, all of their aspects, like just stretching the melody and changing the harmony and just creating like odd rhythms, or like a totally different bass line that creates a totally different groove. And then you're right, there's these other songs that are so pristine. And it's not that they're more pristine than the others, but like they have something about them that it feels like untouchable. And I'm trying to put it into words, because I feel most of it comes from like a gut feeling. A lot of it's not necessarily a method or a formula. And that's why sometimes it's so hard to communicate these things, especially when we want to express them to people that are on their own journey musically, right? Because when we talk about taste, for instance, we are dealing with our individuality. We're dealing with like something so personal and so unique of each of us, right? Like I like watermelons and and you like pears, and in that sense, this particular exercise of just morphing a song and creating it and bringing it into these other universes has a similar process to me. Like I ingest it, quote unquote. Now that I guess we're talking about like it as some sort of nutrition. And then the way that I feel that it's the right way is like, how will this song be transmitted? And again, going back to that idea of the meaning, right? How will the meaning of the song, that the depth of that feeling, and in this case, I'm talking even beyond the lyrics themselves. It's like the feeling, that core emotional content that's within this song. How can I transmit that without without me interfering with that message, And yeah, specifically in the case of Little Person, if everyone here has the chance to listen to that song, it's a song written for the Synecdoche, New York film. And I remember watching this movie and being so struck at the end. I was like in such a conflicted, because you don't get answers at the end. And then, and then the credits start coming, and then there's this song, and I was like, whoa, that song really like made such an impression on me. And then I started relating it with my own life, and it started getting so much meaning, for my own personal life. And so I started to play it. That's how it is. You start learning songs because you enjoy them, and because they make you feel certain things. And there was so little change that I was like, okay, I'm just gonna play it like this. I might have made maybe a couple of different like bass lines on certain moments in relationship with the original. But yeah, it was very, very, very similar. So I would say it's about taste, and you have to trust that, because that will make you who you are. That will make your music Nikki's music, or Jill's, or Daniel's. And it's beautiful to really do that, and be honest with it. And listen to yourself. Again, another thing that I put into the masterclass, because I think it's so important to listen to your own ear and what that tells you. So that will be, I guess, a long answer, but it's a great question. Actually, I need to think more about it too.
No, it strikes me that certainly all artists approach different songs with a variety of approaches, but it strikes me that you are so open to approaching a song in so many different ways that whenever I listen to you cover a song, I can't, before I hear you play it, I can't assume how you're going to approach it, because you really have such
Right.
like a wide palette that way. And then you may have seen that Jill, who's our clarinet instructor, fantastic music educator and performer herself. I love that it's not just about how you interpret, but how you hear somebody else's interpretation. And for those who are on YouTube, she commented, she said, I actually loved your first performance of Stormy Weather. To me, it sounded so off that it was a new take to the meaning of the song. It sounded happy and with a tongue-in-cheek attitude. Maybe the person in your performance liked Stormy Weather and was happy or relieved that her man was gone. which totally, and that's, if you chose to go that route, you really can change what seems to be the literal meaning of the song, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess this, Jill, thank you so much for your comment. It could be that, our conclusion maybe, because it's great to dive into these topics and understand all the different angles, right? It could be that it's its purpose, basically, right? That what makes the difference. Because it's true, I feel if I had meant to do it that way, you know with, like, I feel knowing that that's the character that I'm going to impersonate, and I feel, for me personally, it would have been more meaningful of a performance, and it could be, and this is very relative, right? Like, how do people perceive your performance, right? But um I have a feeling that every time that I have done this exercise of really got into the story and how it actually connects with me and my experience, and actually I even work with images, like when as like a almost like as an actor would do, because when you need to interpret a character, you need to see, like if you invent, like you have a sister, you need to see your sister to really be um convincing about your message, right? So the same thing with singing. You have all these stories, and then if you're heartbroken, if you're talking about this heartbreak, or it's that man that left you, or that your lover that's no longer there, you have to at least connect in one way or another. That's my feeling, that's my personal feeling. And that's the way that I have a sense that I can connect more with the music, and I could say with my audience as well, but that's not up to me to say, but I really do um believe in that exercise, that you have to have that purpose.
So there's an intentionality there that you could have taken that. If it had been your
Definitely.
intention to convey that message in stormy weather, it would have been a different situation. But what that first performance, the intention wasn't there. I'm breaking into my own news feed. Andy, who I mentioned before, is always behind the scenes, mentioned to me that if you're having trouble with comments on the YouTube stream, if you just reload the live stream, those comments should be working for you now. So if you are on the YouTube stream and trying to send us a comment and have not been able to, try reloading your page and it should work. Like everything in pandemic era the world, we are learning as we go. So doing this on multiple platforms is an interesting challenge. I'm thrilled that it's working so well. And I see that we got another comment and question in from Daniel. Daniel is a fabulous sax player in our program. I think I've made him play every saxophone pretty much so far, except for maybe soprano. He said, thanks for being here. I think the hardest part of soloing is creating a story. I usually try to treat it like a book where you introduce the setting and eventually work it up to the climax and then conclude. I think I get too carried away as a saxophonist to start off my solo too strong rather than leading up to something big. At the same time, incorporating motifs is essential. I don't know how to do that well. What are the right places to put motifs? That's a great question.
Great question. And and I think the first thing I want to say is that there's no one way to tell a story, and there's no same way there's no one way to tell a story, there's no one way to develop your solo. And so I think that's important because I think we would limit ourselves by thinking that every time we need to do the same, in sometimes the common idea would be to start like with less and then keep evolving and then get to a climax and then conclude, like the idea of the storytelling with like the presentation, the beginning, the conflict, and the end. That particular structure, I feel that it can be sort of put into different architectures, and so, for instance, one thing that comes to my mind is that when you're playing with a band, the story is not also being told only by you, and your solo is not only the only story that's happening. So with that said, there's moments where let's say you're playing with another soloist, you're playing with a piano player, and the piano player, instead of actually leaving the solo on a resolution, keeps climbing its energy and keeps going and further and further, and then he just passes you that energy into your solo. So what are you going to do? You need to react to that because you're all storytellers. So in that case, for instance, it could be that you take that energy and develop that further. So instead of starting, as we know, like this idea of a formula wouldn't work there. You just need to react, especially in a scenario like a jazz setting where you're improvising. So for instance, that moment you would just take his energy or her energy and keep going. um, when it comes to the idea of motifs within an improvisation, um, there's also so many answers. I think um, there's some, I don't know if you know this pianist called Brad Meldo. Brad Meldo is a real genius of motivic development, and I would recommend listening to music with this lens now, so that you actually take this information from great performers. You know, like put your ear into great recordings and look for this particular um, concept. Some people would start a song some people are so evolved in this concept that they would start a solo with a particular motif, then keep developing, but then on the second chorus or even further in, they would reinstate that in different ways. Like, you know, it's basically having a really wide um, vision, you know, a really wide vision of your platform of expression. Like, what am I going to do with, let's say, these two choruses? What am I going to do with these three choruses? um, you can use motifs to create tension. And here I'm remembering maybe some tunes or some examples from Brad Meldo where, like, you know, like he would go up, let's say, a specific motif using particularly, I would say, I can't remember how it's called, transposition or something. So it would go like, but then using that to also get out of like getting out harmonically, you know, and then everything makes sense because, you know, rhythmically the ear it's absolutely engaged in that idea, and then it takes you out from the harmony and then you're still there. So like there's many ways of using motifs. And where it's also a great question, since I also on the masterclass I talked about several ways of developing them. um, the answer also could be that you can use them everywhere, you know, because like the idea is to connect, right? The idea is to create a cohesiveness between your phrases. So if I have let's say if we play with question and answer, you know, like this particular motif would not be this one, and then something else could happen, let's say repetition or fragmentation, and then the question becomes the next phrase after all that. And so it's a matter of playing with it, right? It's a matter of like experimenting and see how that resonates with you. um, but one thing that I want to finish this answer with is that always connect with your ear. You know, your ear, if you let the space to listen to yourself, there'll be so many answers there. Because if you listen to music, which I'm sure you do, if you study your scales and your arpeggios and your phrases and nuances, and you're listening to recordings, you have a lot of information you think you don't, but like a lot of the answers might be already in your ear. So practice also listening to that, and just giving yourself that space to close your eyes, and let's say we're practicing over a blues, you know, and then keep that backtrack going, and then like try to hear your phrases, you know, and then go into the instruments, you know, like really connect those two. Because, you know, where do I put the motif? Your ear will probably tell you, and you got to trust it, you know. Mm-hmm.
I loved that your talk about your discussion of motifs did exactly what you're saying there. It really reminds us to listen to ourselves. I think it's beginning and intermediate, and if we're honest, probably all improvisers sometimes get overwhelmed with this feeling of responsibility for having every brilliant harmonic, rhythmic, formal, melodic, um, and phrasing idea going at the same time, and that everything is a constant stream of new material, when in fact, if you actually just listen to what you played, you're giving yourself clues about what to do next, and it gets you out of worrying about all of those parameters at the same time, and just hearing the melody and hearing small digestible amounts of the melody that you can actually work with, instead of feeling like you have to have an encyclopedia of harmony in your brain for every 2 beats of a song. And I think that's it's important for all of us. And I think, working with students, I see a lot of students, and I remember feeling this way, just completely overwhelmed that I was supposed to be responsible for all of those things. And your motivic approach really takes all of that out of the conversation and just says focus on what you just said. And
Whoa, I love how you're putting it. That's
well,
exactly that's exactly
it was
it.
your idea. I'm just excited about it.
Yeah, but I love that idea of like focus on what you just said.
Yeah.
Because we're basically, I mean, when we communicate, we are all the time telling stories or developing on our stories or developing on our concepts, our conversations, speeches, all. I mean, the way that we communicate is like that. So music is no different, Yeah.
I love it.
That's
I
great.
also love, we're getting a bunch of questions in. I'm thrilled to see that we've got some questions coming from the YouTube channel as well, including some of our alumni. So we have graduated folks who are back getting a little more jazz education with you today. That's fantastic. One of our graduated trombone players, Susie, just wrote in and asked, do you find yourself leaning toward a certain feel or a certain story, either in improvisation, composition, or covering other songs? Any recurring inspirations for music and stories?
Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm. That's a great question. I'm trying to think of. I would say, in general, a lot of the music I choose to, let's say, to cover, just to put certain focus on this answer. Some of the songs, or most of the songs I choose to cover, there is a direct relation with the story when it comes to my personal life. I realized very early on that I just cannot, as a singer, I cannot sing a song that I don't feel connected with, that I don't feel identified with. And it could be my pet peeve. Pet peeve is the right word?
Yep.
Yeah, basically, it could be some kind of weakness. Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, in the sense that, like, you could claim like, oh, but like you're limiting yourself, to experience other things. But there's something very natural in the way that I approach music, that I have to put my whole spirit, my whole body, my whole being into music. So if there's something in a song that I cannot connect with, that I feel that it doesn't represent me, or that I even sometimes it's even songs. Let's say there's songs that in English that have a little bit of like a language that it's not I cannot relate to. Let's say it's an older too old kind of English that it would sound weird like if I sing it. You know what I'm saying? So I'm respectful of that part of my approach, because to be honest, every song that you choose, this is the way I see it. It's first of all, it's like almost like a mantra, in the sense that you know we make music every day. We play these songs all the time. I mean, when I'm on tour, I have to sing these songs that I choose every night. So they have to be songs that enunciating their message would make me feel something good, would make me envision something um, beautiful or cathartic or something that I care about, because it's an invocation of a message that I need to respect and be connected with. Otherwise, even energetically, I feel that I would not be in the right place, you know? So I don't know if I gave a little bit of a too much like of a metaphysical answer to that question. But that's something I like to share, because it's also liberating too, you know, the fact that at a certain point you're like, what do I want to sing about? You know, what is really, what do I really care? What if I had to sing it 15 million times? I would, every day I would be so happy and so you know, full of energy to keep saying this over and over again. We're like, you know, we predicate in a way. um yeah, and then on the other hand, um I guess some of you might know some of my influences, but I definitely have a wide array of music I dive into. Um I love um it's actually, I'm trying to like put it into a short answer. I'm an eclectic musician. So a lot of my stories come from, you know, the Latin American world, the American songbook of like every time. I mean, like the American songbook, but also some folk music and rock and Brazilian music. I've dived into dived, yeah. And I'm always open to find amazing songs and find my ways to interpret them. Hmm.
I think metaphysical is perfectly fine. This is a metaphysical thing, right?
Definitely.
I've got a question from Sophia. She is a piano player and a vibes player, an instrument close to my heart. She's currently playing in a couple of our ensembles here at Knox. She's got a two-part question. I'll read the first part. One problem I often have is with the use of space in a solo. I'm fairly good at playing the changes, but a comment I get very often is probably from me sometimes is that I need to leave more space. What are your recommendations to practice for that?
That's great. That's great. And I honestly feel that the 7 exercises on motivic development might be really good for it, because what it does is that you, first of all, you cannot play by heart, you know, because you've chosen a specific, let's say a specific motif with a rhythmic aspect of it, um and you have to, let's say we're on a blues and on F, and then, you know, when we change to B flat, you just cannot play by memory like that amazing lick that, you know, that you practice, because you have to commit to this idea that you just started, you know, and that will will need from you to give that space to think what are the next notes, or to think where am I going to put this phrase next, you know. So if you're studying motivic development, it will necessarily help you with the practice of space, because you have to give yourself that time to listen to yourself, to continue developing. Yeah. um that's what what I can come up with. I mean, and the other, it's definitely the very blatant, um the blatant practice of living space, you know, and basically not not letting your not letting, that sounds bad, no, um encouraging your phrases to have a beginning and an ending, you know. um because that is something that we take for granted, but it's not that easy, you know. um when we're practicing improvisation, it could be that we're just so concerned about like playing the right changes, or exactly what you're saying. I am, yeah, okay, so yeah, I'm good at playing the changes, but then we don't leave space. That's something because we are concerned about the changes instead of being being like beyond that, so your next step is to do those two things, motivic development, but then the other one has to do with start a phrase and finish it. And even if it's short or even if it's long, you have to finish it, you know and give yourself that time of ending and then start another idea. It's challenging, I think, but it's good to go into the practice, improvisational practice, with that in mind, and see where you can get. Maybe you'll witness that, like, oh my god, I played already 8 bars and I haven't stopped. So just put attention to that beginning and ending.
That dovetails so well with something that you talk about in your presentation about ending songs. And a lot of times we forget to think about that, but it's the exact same concept within your solo. Is we're so worried about what to play next, but we forget that you actually have to end the thing, and that's really powerful. And you're so right about that. But I think it's what we forget in the moment. I think those are great tips. Sophia also asked, as a comping player, I want to be able to interact better with the soloists when I'm playing. Does that take getting to know the individual soloist better, or are there general tips for building that skill?
Yeah, this is beautiful because we were talking about Rameldo. I think I heard him in one interview saying that comping is a social skill. You know, you could be at your room, like practicing comping for 3 years, but if you don't play with other people and really practice the art of comping, which means, yeah, to accompany, right? To like have that social interaction, you will never get better at it. You could have amazing syncopation, you could have amazing all the voicings that you want to have in your life, but comping needs to be practiced in with humans. And that's tricky for us right now, obviously. um but there's ways too, like it could be cool if you find albums that have no she's a piano player, correct? Yeah. Find albums that are pianoless, let's say, just saxophone, bass, and drums. There's a bunch of those out there, especially, in the modern era, but definitely in the past too. I'm thinking uh, even, well, with guitar trios could be a little trickier, but it also challenging because to comp for guitarists, you also need to be aware of when they go into a more harmonic function. So then you interact with that as a piano player and get out of the way a little bit, or interact with that. So my tip would be, yeah, put yourself in that situation, and always, 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 always listen to definitely the soloist, but listen to all the band. When you're comping, listen to the snare. What are the snare rhythms? The snare is giving you so much, like, information for you to develop. When you feel that, let's say, oh, I don't know what to do here, okay, listen to if we're talking about, let's say, a swing, um a swing scenario, but actually it applies to everything. When we're playing like straight ahead, or we're playing like other rhythms, like, there's so much on the drums, and then the bass would like actually give you maybe sometimes other bass lines, not just the root. So like you can also put attention to that, and get inspired by it to keep developing your own ideas. So for now, since I hear you guys are not yet together, but like I would definitely just go have fun with some records and get the charts and go into these. Probably you find amazing musicians so in this record, so you can just play with that band and really listen. That's the skill that you have to build.
We have another question from another alum. This is Doug. He is a trumpet player, but also a very fine composer and multi-instrumentalist. And he asked, have there been stories that you wanted to tell but could not, either from a taste reason or maybe because it did not fit within the context of an album that you were working on? Have you? So I think that gets into, putting an album together, the relationship between individual songs and stories that you want to tell and the concept of an album, I think is part of what he's asking there.
Oh, definitely. I mean, excuse me, 1 second. Yeah, I was going to mention that this idea of storytelling applies to almost everything the way that I see it. Like I'm even on this paradigm when I think about a concert, like how am I going to start the concert or the set list, where will I take my listener, and like how will I connect this song to the next one. um it it all has this same idea of developing this journey, right? And in that context, and also in albums, I've had a few times where there's certain songs that are either they just don't make it to the album, um because of the story, the storyline. I remember there was one time, and this might be a good advice for students that are going into recording their albums and and choosing their repertoire. I think it's very useful to actually think ahead of that album, like when you're going to put play, where all that's going to take you until, all right, the album is over, like really to put attention on how do you want that journey, and where, again, same questions, right? Where do you want to take your listener in that hour, in that 45 minutes, or if it's an EP, in that like 30 minutes? Because I remember there was one album in particular that, like, I just had a bunch of arrangements and songs that I obviously loved them all, and then I recorded them, 2 days in the studio, and like putting all this money in, and then suddenly I'm over recording and I love all the songs, and then I sit down with the 13 songs and I'm like, oh my god, this album is so boring, you know like I couldn't make sense of all the 13 songs all together, because I didn't think of it as a story, I didn't think of it as, I just thought about like little pieces. But then when you put that whole piece together, which is how we present our music so far, I know that like right now albums are almost like ancient thing, but I'm still in that vibe. I'm still in like telling a whole journey, a whole story. And I had to make an EP, like I had to divide it in 6, and then other 6 were like totally forgotten. Anyway, it was so yeah. I don't know if I diverted from the question, but yeah, that's something that has happened to me, where like I have to leave songs behind. And I don't know if the question is also related to not being able to interpret a specific, not being able, just not feeling connected. And I've turned down some work because I don't feel identified with the song, and I know that not everybody can do this, but it's something that has been I've had to do it, because I just cannot I just cannot how do you say compromise that truth that needs to come out from me when I make music, And yeah, it's kind of controversial, but
That's got to be a hard line. I mean, obviously there's financial considerations, but if you're able to do it, there's probably somebody out there who can connect to it, who can perform that music in a way that you can't. But boy, especially these days when there's so little work for
I
musicians, it can be
know.
scary to ever say no to anything.
I know.
Diego has a great question. Diego is a singer and viola player here at Knox, and he asks, have you ever had a performance where you were certain you had communicated an intended meaning and then found out that the audience interpreted it very differently? Or even maybe I can imagine that happening in a recording, like you've recorded something and then played it for somebody and they got something completely different out of it than what you intended, or does that happen to you?
Yeah, and this is something that it's very interesting to think about as musicians and storytellers, artists, or whatever, because I don't think that what I intend to express needs to be what people get, like I am in the line of like, I'll take this story, I'll take this message out there, but every pair of ears will make this song their own. And that's so beautiful, and that's actually what I intend the most, because there's a story there, right? And in some cases it's universal enough that some people will identify with it, but when I say certain things, they will actually identify with their own lives in a very different way, or they would think of this particular set of lyrics as related with something very different from what I got inspired by, you know so I think that's beautiful, and that's definitely something that I love about music in general. Like, everybody has their own meaning, everybody creates their own, everybody has their own stories, and when they listen to music, you actually just connect with your life, and it touches you in your own way, and that's great. So I'm trying to think if there's any song in particular that uh, you know that maybe the lyrics could be so vague that someone would like come up with like a total different thing. um I can't think of it right now. I'm gonna leave it there to get that memory back if it happened. Thank you.
It seems like a very I think jazzers are more open to people bringing their own interpretations. Sometimes certain composers, there can be a sense of control, and that there's a product to turn out, and that certainly happens in all genres and styles. And then there are people who are much more open to kind of sending it out into the world and letting people make of it what they want. But that's brave too, because that's your music, right? It's got to be scary to put that out into the world, and not just to wait and see if people like it or not, but to see what effect it really has on them. And a lot of that you can't know, right? They're listening to it in their ear pods somewhere on the other side of the planet from you. You don't know um, what your relationship with your audience is, even though you very clearly have one, because there's not very much more intimate than listening to someone's music and words in your head. So it's got to
Yeah,
be an
yeah,
interesting position to be in.
yeah. And also, it's very lucky too, because when actually, I've had certain people um express to me that there's certain songs, for instance, that they have helped them with like certain losses in their life, and that listening to that song was like healing, for instance, or that song would bring memories of this particular person that was no longer in their lives, and all these things. You're like, whoa, music can be so powerful. It is so powerful. And as musicians, we sometimes get caught in rightfully so, because we have to practice a lot, you know, we get caught in like the scale, and then but when we finally get the experience of seeing how, you know, like just a regular person will listen to our music and what will happen, and how they will, you know, like change. Some people change with music, and it's powerful. Like you guys, I mean, all the students here, I want to tell you, you have a responsibility to make this world better. I'm just
That's the
joking.
best. No, it's well, and artists have the ability to do that, but it's responsibility too, and I'm sure that can be a lot to take when that comes back at you as an artist.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it does put me, actually sometimes put me back in track, you know, because um I realize the almost like the service that we have, that you know, like music as a service. It's so beautiful. Like, you know, it's not just for me, it's like also for all these people that are going through hardships, or these people that like actually are alone, or like, you know, or that, you know, there's so many cases, or just to be happier and just to move your body, or like um music is essential in that sense, you know.
It certainly is, and boy, I suspect all of us, if we didn't know that before, have known it even more over the last few months.
Right.
I can't. I hesitate to say that it seems like this has worked out perfectly. We're right up at about the hour mark, which is what we were hoping for the Q&A. And I have the questions in my queue. I've just gotten the last question. This almost seems too good to be true. I think we could not have asked for a better inaugural event. And I also like that you kind of closed your last answer with "Go make the world a better place." What a great takeaway, right?
Yes.
So I do think that we're close to we're at the end of the questions that I've got. I wondered if you had anything else that you wanted to talk about that we hadn't brought up, or if you feel like your brain has been picked totally and all of your ideas have been shared.
Well, I don't know. It's great. It's been so great to share with all of you guys. I always love this process of kind of theorizing a little bit, you know, putting things that we sometimes do in such an either intuitive or more like unverbal way, to try to express them, and to find that communication, musical um expression and communication through conversation. It's great, and I am so happy that I was able to do this for you guys, and that you guys are creating this space too. I'm so thankful to have this opportunity to share with you all. So
Well, we
thank you
feel the
so much.
same way. And I know, actually, of course, Andy snuck in a question right at the very end. It's a question that Andy and I like to ask guest artists a lot. So, one of the things that I hope that this conversation and all of the conversations in this series do is they inspire people to go out and listen to your music, to listen to music after, you know, that this reminds us of what we want to explore. And of course, I feel very passionately that the 7 artists that are part of our series are some of the greatest people making the greatest music right now. So people should be
Absolutely,
inspired to
so
go listen
great.
to Camila tonight, right after this. You know, turn on Camila while you're having dinner. You're not going to regret it. But Andy asked a question that we also like to ask. What are you listening to these days? Anything that's really inspiring you, an artist, um, and of course, not specifically jazz. Usually people answer that question all over the map. Is there, you know, right now, what are you listening to that's really turning you on?
Yeah, I like that question, and I did do. I'm having this particular community on Patreon. If you guys know Patreon, um, I started this new series called Recommended by Camila, where I'm putting like some albums there, and those are on the top of my head right now. Um, I got obsessed with an album by Bill Frisell, Gregor Maret. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this, and Romain Collin. Oh, I feel like I'm pronouncing everybody's name terrible. Um,
Better than I would do, I bet.
that's called Americana. Oh my God. So beautiful. That's definitely an album that I recommend. It's very how would you say, kind of like a vibe, you know? And I've been looking lately for, probably because of the times that we're in, for music that does not require so much energy from myself, like I need like a a journey that just doesn't have so much drama. And so that particular album I definitely recommend. um I've been listening to also to Brian Blade Fellowship and the Fellowship Band, kind of revisiting some albums that I was listening when I was like really young, and I realized, whoa, this album really um like really these albums like touched me so much when I was growing up. Like I remember really wanted to go to New York and check out all these bands. And then some other discoveries lately. There's I haven't heard it so much, but I found this singer, not necessarily a jazz singer, although yeah, what is anyway,
Right.
it's a very alternative sound. It's called Agnes Obel, and the album's called Myopia. And then two more I'm recommending: Pedro Martins from Brazil, called Vox. Amazing guitarist and singer. And another one that I revisited lately was Steve Reich, ensemble music for 18 musicians, which I love
Ah,
because it's like such a good trance, and I love that. So
those
I
are
hope you enjoy those.
that's it, yeah. Some of those I know very well, and some of them I don't know at all. So I get to go up and listen to more. So that Bill Frisell album, everything on there's amazing. Small Town off that record. Talk about something that connected with me out here in the
Ooh,
prairie. It's just
totally.
boy, oh, what great recommendations! Thank you for sharing.
Thank
So
you.
now we all have a listening list that starts with Camila Meza and ends with Camila Meza and has all these great artists in the middle. I just wanted I want to just very formally thank you, Camila, for sharing, for all the work that went into this incredible masterclass that you produced for us, for sharing your passion, your experience, your knowledge. Um, Thank you to
Thank you.
everybody who is here with us in the webinar call, and those of you who joined us online on YouTube. You know, this was a risk we didn't know. We've never done anything like this, so I just cannot tell you how wonderful it is to hear from current students, former students, community members, music educators, all being part of this. Is exactly what we hoped would have happened. And of course, a huge thank you to the Jerome Mirza Foundation. Their incredibly generous support has allowed us to do this. To Knox College for their support. And then just a couple of quick notes. Camila's keynote presentation that you saw earlier today and this Q&A will both be on the Knox College YouTube channel. So you can share them with other people. You can go back and revisit. Students, you can go back and just pick one of the 7 motivic development exercises and really dig into it. I really thought watching your video, I could take almost any 5 minutes of your video and use that as my practice plan for the next week. So
Whoa,
students,
that's
I would
great.
recommend doing that. It will be right there for you to use. We have 6 more of these coming up, and the topics and the artists could not be more diverse. Every single week, every single event is going to be just such a different exploration of an idea or ideas. Our next one is next Sunday. We're not doing them every single Sunday, but working with artist schedules, we have some close together, and then we have some more spread apart. But our next one is next Sunday with Amir Al-Safar, an incredible trumpet player, both classical and jazz. He's going to be talking about his presentation is called Beyond the Other Shore, Transcultural Music Making. He's going to be talking about Arabic musical traditions that have served as a foundation for his musical training and that he now uses in jazz and other styles outside of the traditional Arabic styles of singing and music making, and in particular how to play and hear microtones, things outside of our 12 note Western scale, and more broadly how you can use transcultural traditions to help how we all can to help expand our voices as improvising artists. You can follow us on Facebook at Knox Jazz Year. You can learn more about all of the upcoming artists and residency events on the Knox College website. Just hit Mirza, M-I-R-Z-A, in the search. You'll see great information about all of our artists. And I think that gets me to my concluding remarks. I just want to thank you again so much, Camila. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. It was a real pleasure, and we hope we get to see you and make music with you someday in person here at Knox College. That would be the perfect next chapter.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much, Nikki and Andy and everyone at Knox. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we're going to close out the session here momentarily. Thank you to everyone who joined us. Have a wonderful evening.